The fluorescent lights above the Pentagon briefing room cast harsh shadows across Admiral Victoria Sterling's face as she watched the security footage for the third time. Her manicured fingers drummed against the polished oak table, each tap echoing like gunfire in the silence. On the screen, a man in a janitor's uniform moved through the halls with a precision that made her blood run cold. She had mocked his war stories just hours before, called them fairy tales, laughed when he mentioned Desert Storm, but now, studying the way he swept corners like a man clearing hostile territory, watching him position himself with perfect tactical awareness, even while pushing a mop bucket, she understood with crystalline clarity that she had just humiliated a living legend. The kind of legend that could destroy careers with 2 words. The kind that made her hand tremble as she reached for the red phone that connected directly to the Secretary of Defense. Because if the man calling himself Frank Martinez was really who she now suspected him to be, then the joke was about to be on her. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The morning had started like any other at the Pentagon. Admiral Victoria Sterling strode through the corridors of power, wearing her authority like armor, her crisp white uniform gleaming under the institutional lighting. At 47, she commanded respect through a combination of sharp intellect, ruthless ambition, and an unwavering belief that rank equaled worth. Her rise to admiral had been meteoric, built on strategic thinking and an ability to navigate the political waters of Washington with surgical precision. She had earned her stars through budget meetings and policy papers, not battlefields. Her combat experience consisted of 3 brief deployments to relatively quiet sectors, enough to check the boxes on her service record, but not enough to truly understand the weight that some men carried in their silence. To Victoria, war was statistics on spreadsheets, casualty reports filed in triplicate, and strategic decisions made from the comfort of climate-controlled offices. That morning, she was scheduled to inspect the maintenance operations in the lower levels of the Pentagon. It was a routine review, the kind of administrative duty that came with her position. As she walked through the custodial areas with her aide, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hayes, she noticed him immediately. Frank Martinez pushed his mop bucket with quiet efficiency, his movements deliberate and economical. He was in his early 60s, with gray threading through his dark hair and lines etched deep around eyes that seemed to hold more than they revealed. His custodial uniform was clean but worn, practical boots that had seen better days but were still carefully maintained. There was something about the way he carried himself, a bearing that didn't quite match his current station. "Excuse me," Victoria said, stopping beside him. Frank looked up, his expression polite but guarded. "Yes, ma'am?" "How long have you worked here?" "About 8 years now." His voice was steady, respectful, but not deferential. There was a quiet dignity in his tone that Victoria found oddly irritating. "Previous employment?" Frank hesitated for just a moment. "Military service." Victoria's eyes lit up with the particular gleam of someone about to demonstrate their superiority. "Oh, really? What branch?" "Army." "Rank?" Another pause. "Various positions." Victoria smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. "Various positions, how delightfully vague. Let me guess, kitchen duty, motor pool?" She glanced at Lieutenant Commander Hayes, who shifted uncomfortably beside her. Frank's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I served where I was needed." "I'm sure you did." Victoria's voice dripped with condescension. "You know, I've served 3 combat tours myself. Real deployments, not the kind they hand out participation ribbons for. Afghanistan, Iraq, Persian Gulf. I imagine that's a bit more intensive than whatever you experienced." Frank said nothing, but something shifted in his eyes. a hardening like steel being heated and cooled. Victoria continued, emboldened by his silence. You know what I find interesting about people like you? You always have these grand stories about your service. Desert Storm this, special operations that, but somehow you end up pushing mops in the basement of the Pentagon. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. If you were really the warrior you probably tell people you were, don't you think you'd have achieved a bit more in life? Lieutenant Commander Hayes cleared her throat softly. Ma'am, perhaps we should continue with the inspection. Victoria waved her off. No, I'm curious now. Tell me, Frank, what was your MOS, your military occupational specialty? I bet it was something real heroic like laundry services or food preparation. Frank set down the mop handle and looked directly at Victoria. For a moment she felt something cold move through her chest, a recognition that she was looking into the eyes of someone who had seen things she couldn't imagine. I was a forward observer, Frank said quietly. 10th Mountain Division, later attached to Special Operations. Victoria's smile widened. A forward observer? Well, that sounds impressive. I suppose you called in airstrikes and artillery, probably saved entire battalions single-handedly. Sometimes. Sometimes. Victoria turned to Hayes again. Do you hear this? Sometimes he saved entire battalions. I love how these stories get more elaborate over time. Next, he'll be telling us he won the war single-handedly. Frank's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath the surface now. I did my job. Your job. Victoria's laugh was cruel now, designed to wound. Your job was probably reading coordinates off a map, while real soldiers did the actual fighting. But please regale us with tales of your battlefield heroics. I'm sure you have some wonderful stories about Desert Storm. The corridor had grown quiet. Other Pentagon employees had begun to notice the commotion, some slowing their pace to listen. Frank looked around at the gathering audience, his expression unreadable. I was at the Battle of 73 Easting, he said simply. Victoria blinked, caught off guard by the specific reference. 73 Easting? Really? Well, that's convenient. One of the most famous tank battles in modern history. How lucky for you to have been there. Frank's voice took on a different quality now, harder, more precise. February 26th, 1991. 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. We were conducting reconnaissance when we made contact with the Republican Guard, Tawakalna Division. Victoria felt the first stirring of unease. The details were too specific, too accurate for casual boasting. The engagement began at approximately 15:30 hours, Frank continued, his voice taking on the cadence of an after-action report. We were outnumbered 3-1. Republican Guard had T-72 tanks, BMP fighting vehicles, artillery support. Weather was deteriorating, sandstorm moving in from the west. The small crowd that had gathered was listening intently now. Victoria noticed that several military personnel had stopped what they were doing, their expressions growing serious. I was forward observer for Eagle Troop, Frank said. Call sign Copper 7. When we made contact with the Iraqi armor, I had 17 minutes to coordinate close air support before the sandstorm hit and grounded all aircraft. Lieutenant Commander Hayes was staring now, her mouth slightly open. Victoria felt her confidence beginning to crack. 17 minutes, Frank repeated. I called in A-10 Thunderbolts, Apache gunships, and coordinated with an artillery battery 20 kilometers to our rear. The Iraqis had us in a kill zone. If I missed those coordinates by even 50 meters, our own people would die. Victoria's hands had grown cold. The way he spoke, the precision of his memory, the technical details. This wasn't the rambling of someone embellishing old stories. This was the testimony of someone who had lived through hell and remembered every second of it. We destroyed 37 Iraqi tanks that day, Frank said quietly. Captured over 400 enemy prisoners. No American casualties in Eagle Troop. He paused, looking directly at Victoria. I received the Silver Star for my actions that day. The citation reads that my fire control and coordination under extreme conditions were instrumental in the success of what became known as the Battle of 73 Easting. The silence in the corridor was absolute. Victoria felt the blood draining from her face as the implications hit her like a physical blow. The Battle of 73 Easting was legendary among military historians. It had been studied at West Point, analyzed in war colleges, written about in books and documentaries. The forward observers who had called in the fire support that day were heroes, their names spoken with reverence in military circles. "You're telling me," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that you're, Staff Sergeant Francisco Martinez," Frank said, later promoted to Master Sergeant, Copper 7. He picked up his mop handle again. "Will there be anything else, Admiral?" Victoria stared at him, her mind racing. If this man was who he claimed to be, then she had just publicly humiliated one of the most decorated non-commissioned officers in recent military history, a man whose actions had quite literally shaped the outcome of modern warfare. Lieutenant Commander Hayes stepped forward, her voice carefully respectful. "Master Sergeant Martinez, it's an honor, sir." Frank nodded politely. "Just Frank now, Commander. That was a long time ago." Victoria found her voice, though it came out strained. "If you're really who you say you are, why are you working as a janitor?" Frank considered the question for a moment. "Because this is honest work. Because someone has to keep this place clean. And because I've already given my wars to this country, now I give my peace to my daughter." "Your daughter?" "Sophia. She's 16, plays violin in the school orchestra, makes honor roll every semester. She doesn't need a war hero for a father. She just needs a father." The weight of his words settled over the group like a shroud. Victoria realized that she had been staring at a man who had chosen love over legacy, who had traded recognition for responsibility, who had found honor in humility. "I should continue with my rounds," Frank said. "The floors won't clean themselves." As he began to push the mop bucket away, Victoria found herself calling out, "Wait." Frank turned back, his expression patient but wary. Victoria felt the eyes of everyone in the corridor on her. She could feel her carefully constructed authority crumbling like sand in her hands. "I owe you an apology." "No, ma'am, you don't." "Yes, I do. I judged you based on your current position rather than your service. That was wrong of me." Frank studied her face for a long moment. "Admiral, you're not the first person to look at a janitor and see only a janitor. Probably won't be the last. But you're not just a janitor." Frank smiled for the first time, an expression that transformed his weathered features. "Actually, ma'am, I am just a janitor. That's the point. The war was then. This is now. I'm exactly who I choose to be." Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition of a kind of strength she had never encountered before. This man had held one of the most important positions in modern warfare, had made split-second decisions that saved lives and changed history, and now he cleaned floors with the same dedication he had once brought to the battlefield. "How do you do it?" she asked quietly. "How do you go from calling in airstrikes to mopping floors?" Frank leaned on his mop handle, considering the question seriously. "The same way anyone does anything important, Admiral. One step at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time." "But don't you miss it? The recognition, the respect, the importance?" Frank glanced around the corridor, at the marble walls and polished floors, at the symbols of power that surrounded them. "I get plenty of respect, ma'am. My daughter respects me. My neighbors respect me. The people I work with respect me. That's enough. Victoria found herself struggling with a concept that challenged everything she had believed about success and achievement. But your legacy. My legacy is walking around in a high school somewhere in Arlington, probably complaining about her calculus homework and practicing violin until the neighbors want to call the police. Frank's eyes softened. That's the only legacy that matters to me now. Lieutenant Commander Hayes spoke up quietly. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, how many people know who you really are? Frank shrugged. A few, my supervisor, some of the security folks who ran background checks. But most people here just see a guy who empties trash cans and mops floors, and that's fine with me. Victoria was staring at him with something approaching awe. You could have parlayed your service record into consulting work, speaking engagements, book deals. You could have made millions. I could have, Frank agreed, but then I would have missed watching Sophia learn to drive. I would have missed her first recital, her first heartbreak, her first real victory. I would have missed the chance to be present for the most important mission of my life. The corridor had filled with more people now, drawn by the commotion. Word was spreading through the Pentagon grapevine that something significant was happening. Victoria noticed several senior officers among the gathered crowd, their expressions ranging from curiosity to recognition to growing respect. Master Sergeant Martinez, a voice called out from the crowd. Victoria turned to see General Patricia Hawkins approaching, her 4 stars gleaming on her shoulders. I thought I recognized your voice. Frank straightened slightly, a reflexive response to the presence of a general officer. General Hawkins. I was a lieutenant colonel in 3rd Armored Division during Desert Storm, General Hawkins said as she approached. Your fire control at 73 Easting saved the lives of several of my soldiers. I've wanted to thank you for 23 years. Frank extended his hand. You don't owe me any thanks, General. We were all just doing our jobs. General Hawkins took his hand and held it firmly. No, Master Sergeant, you were doing much more than your job. You were writing history. Victoria watched this exchange with growing amazement. A 4-star general was thanking her janitor. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. General, Frank said quietly, I appreciate the recognition, but I'm not that soldier anymore. I'm just Frank now. I clean these halls, and I go home to help my daughter with her homework. General Hawkins studied his face with the keen insight of someone who had commanded troops in combat. You know what I think, Master Sergeant? I think you're still serving. You're just serving differently now. Frank considered this. Maybe so, but the uniform is different, and the mission has changed. The mission has evolved, General Hawkins corrected, from serving your country to serving your family. That's not a step down, Master Sergeant. That's a step forward. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, though she couldn't quite explain why. She was witnessing something profound, a redefinition of honor and success that challenged everything she thought she understood about military service and personal achievement. Admiral Sterling, General Hawkins said, turning her attention to Victoria. I assume you've been properly introduced to Master Sergeant Martinez. Victoria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Actually, General, I'm afraid I owe the Master Sergeant a significant apology. I misjudged him. General Hawkins raised an eyebrow. Misjudged him how? Victoria took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would define her character in the eyes of everyone present. I mocked his service record. I suggested his war stories were exaggerated. I implied that his current position was evidence that his military service was unremarkable. The silence that followed was deafening. General Hawkins's expression grew very serious. I see, the general said slowly. And what do you think now, Admiral? Victoria looked at Frank, who was watching her with patient curiosity, not anger or vindictiveness. "I think I've learned something important about the difference between rank and honor." Frank spoke up, his voice gentle. "Admiral, you don't need to apologize to me. But maybe you could remember this the next time you meet someone whose current circumstances don't tell their whole story." Victoria nodded, feeling humbled in a way she had never experienced before. "I will, Master Sergeant. I promise you that." General Hawkins addressed the crowd that had gathered. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing here is exactly why we serve. Not for recognition, not for advancement, but for the chance to make a difference in ways that matter. Master Sergeant Martinez exemplifies the highest ideals of military service, both in war and in peace." The crowd began to disperse slowly, many stopping to shake Frank's hand or offer words of respect. Victoria remained behind with Lieutenant Commander Hayes, both of them still processing what they had witnessed. "Frank," Victoria said as he prepared to continue his work, "would you mind if I asked you one more question?" "Of course, Admiral. Do you ever regret it, choosing this life over what you could have had?" Frank smiled, and this time the expression reached his eyes completely. "Admiral, every morning I wake up knowing that I get to see my daughter before she goes to school. Every evening I come home to help her with her homework and listen to her practice violin. Every weekend we go to the movies or work in our garden or just talk about her dreams for the future. I've been present for every important moment of her life since her mother died 8 years ago." He paused, his expression growing serious. What could be worth more than that? Victoria found herself without words. In the span of 30 minutes, this man had redefined every assumption she had made about success, sacrifice, and service. "Besides," Frank added with a gentle smile, "someone has to keep these halls clean so that the people who work here can focus on protecting this country. It's still service, Admiral. It's just a different kind of service." As Frank pushed his mop bucket away, continuing down the corridor with the same quiet efficiency he had shown before, Victoria stood watching him go. She realized that she had just met someone who understood something fundamental that she was only beginning to grasp. That true honor lay not in the recognition you received, but in the love you gave. Lieutenant Commander Hayes spoke quietly beside her. "Admiral, that was humbling," Victoria finished. "That was profoundly humbling." But even as she said the words, Victoria felt something else stirring in her chest. Admiration, yes. Respect, certainly. But also something warmer, something that felt dangerously close to attraction. Not to the war hero Frank had been, but to the man he had chosen to become. The father who had traded glory for presence, recognition for responsibility, legend for love. As they continued with their inspection, Victoria found her thoughts returning again and again to the quiet dignity in Frank's voice, the gentle strength in his demeanor, the way he had handled her cruelty with grace and her questions with patience. For the first time in her career-focused life, Admiral Victoria Sterling found herself wondering what it would be like to be someone's first priority, what it would be like to be loved by someone who understood that true strength sometimes looked like humility, and that the greatest victories were often the quietest ones. The inspection continued, but Victoria's mind was elsewhere, already planning her next encounter with the man who had just taught her that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons and tactics, but with character and choice. Behind them, Frank Martinez continued his rounds, unaware that he had just planted seeds of change in the heart of someone who desperately needed to learn the difference between commanding respect and earning it. The Pentagon's corridors gleamed a little brighter that day, not because they were cleaner, but because they had been walked by someone who understood that honor wasn't something you wore on your uniform. It was something you carried in your heart, one quiet step at a time. 3 days after the corridor encounter, Admiral Victoria Sterling sat in her spacious Pentagon office, staring at a classified file that had arrived on her desk that morning. The official seal of the Department of Defense gleamed from the cover page, and beneath it, typed in precise military font, were the words that had kept her awake for the past 72 hours. Service record, Martinez Francisco, Master Sergeant, retired. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the file. What she found inside would change everything she thought she knew about honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning of heroism. The first page contained Frank's basic information, but it was the second page that made her breath catch. A photograph from 1991 showed a much younger Frank in desert camouflage, his face lean and determined, surrounded by 4 other soldiers. The caption read, "Eagle Troop Forward Observers, 73 Easting, February 1991. But it was the handwritten note paperclipped to the photo that made Victoria's chest tighten. Martinez called in danger close fire support that saved my entire platoon. Without his coordinates, we would have been overrun. Colonel James Mitchell, Ret. Victoria had spent 3 decades in the Navy, rising through the ranks with calculated precision. She understood military bureaucracy, strategic planning, and the politics of advancement. But as she read Frank's service record, she realized she had never truly understood courage. The Battle of 73 Easting hadn't been Frank's first act of heroism. His file revealed a pattern of selfless service spanning 12 years of active duty. In Somalia, he had called in medical evacuation for wounded civilians while under heavy fire. In Panama, he had coordinated artillery support that allowed trapped soldiers to escape an ambush. In Desert Shield, before the ground war even began, he had volunteered for reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. But it was the after-action report from 73 Easting that brought tears to Victoria's eyes. The account, written by Lieutenant Colonel David Hayes, described 17 minutes that changed the course of modern warfare. Frank had been the forward observer for Eagle Troop when they encountered the elite Republican Guard. Outnumbered 3-1 with a sandstorm approaching that would ground all air support, Frank had coordinated precision strikes from A-10 Thunderbolts, Apache helicopters, and artillery batteries. Master Sergeant Martinez displayed extraordinary composure under extreme fire, the report read. With enemy tanks closing to within 800 meters of our position, he maintained precise fire control, adjusting coordinates in real time while taking accurate small arms fire. His ability to coordinate multiple fire support assets simultaneously while maintaining constant communication with ground elements was nothing short of phenomenal. Victoria set down the file and walked to her office window, looking out at the Potomac River. Somewhere in this building, Frank was probably emptying trash cans or mopping floors, carrying on with his quiet dignity, while she sat in her office grappling with the magnitude of what he had accomplished. Her intercom buzzed. "Admiral, you have a call on line 3. General Patricia Hawkins." Victoria picked up the phone. "General Hawkins." "Victoria, I understand you've requested Master Sergeant Martinez's service file." "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to understand what you stepped into 3 days ago." General Hawkins's voice carried a mixture of amusement and concern. "Frank Martinez is a legend, Victoria, the kind of soldier they write books about." "I'm beginning to realize that." "Are you?" "Because reading his file is one thing. Understanding what he's chosen to do with his life since then is another entirely." General Hawkins paused. "Did you know that after his wife died, he turned down 3 separate job offers that would have paid him 6 figures? Defense contractors, military consulting firms, even a position with the State Department." Victoria felt her throat tighten. No, I didn't know that. He chose to work as a custodian because it gave him stable hours and health insurance for his daughter. No travel, no deployments, no nights away from home. He rebuilt his entire life around being the father that little girl needed. Victoria closed her eyes, remembering her cruel words about his grand stories and lack of achievement. General, I need to make this right. How do you plan to do that? Victoria considered the question carefully. I'm not sure yet, but I know I can't leave it the way it is. That evening, Victoria found herself doing something she had never done before. She stayed late at the Pentagon not because of work, but because she was hoping to encounter Frank during his evening rounds. She had spent the afternoon researching everything she could find about the Battle of 73 Easting, reading military analyses, watching documentary footage, studying tactical maps. The more she learned, the more impressed she became. The engagement at 73 Easting was now taught at military academies around the world as an example of perfect fire coordination under extreme pressure. Frank's role in the battle was mentioned in multiple military textbooks, his call signs and fire directions analyzed by scholars and tacticians. At 8:30, she heard the familiar sound of a mop bucket rolling down the corridor outside her office. Victoria took a deep breath and stepped into the hallway. Frank? He looked up, surprised to see her. Admiral Sterling, working late? Yes, Victoria found herself struggling for words. Actually, I was hoping to see you. Frank leaned against his mop handle, patient but wary. What can I do for you, ma'am? Victoria gestured toward her office. Would you mind? I'd like to talk with you privately. Frank hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Of course. Victoria's office was a testament to her naval career. Photographs with dignitaries, commendations on the walls, models of ships she had served on. Frank looked around with polite interest, but no apparent intimidation. Please sit down, Victoria said, indicating the chair across from her desk. Frank sat, his posture relaxed but alert. What's on your mind, Admiral? Victoria opened his service file on her desk. I've been reading about you. Frank's expression didn't change. I see. Frank, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation. Victoria met his eyes. 3 days ago, I acted out of arrogance and ignorance. I judged you based on assumptions that were not only wrong but deeply unfair. Admiral, you don't need to. Oh, yes, I do. Victoria's voice was firm. I've spent my career believing that achievement was measured by rank, by position, by recognition. When I saw you working as a custodian, I assumed it meant your military service was unremarkable. I was wrong about everything. Frank studied her face carefully. What changed your mind? Victoria gestured to the file. This, your service record, the after-action reports, the testimonials from soldiers whose lives you saved. She paused. But more than that, what you told me about your daughter, about choosing to be present for her rather than chasing recognition for yourself. Sophia is my priority, Frank said simply. She has been since her mother died. Victoria felt her chest tighten. Tell me about her, about your wife. Frank's expression softened. Maria was a teacher, elementary school. She had this way of making every child feel special, feel seen. When Sophia was born, Maria said she wanted to give her everything she never had growing up. His voice grew quiet. Cancer took her when Sophia was 8. Ovarian cancer, very aggressive. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered. Maria made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would put Sophia first, always, no matter what. Frank's eyes met Victoria's. That's why I took this job. Stable hours, good benefits, no travel. Sophia needed a father who would be there every day, not a hero who was always somewhere else. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. and you've honored that promise. Every day for 8 years. Sophia is 16 now, and she's never had to wonder if I would be there for her. Piano recitals, parent-teacher conferences, driving lessons, heartbreaks. I've been present for all of it. But don't you miss it? The military life, the importance of what you did. Frank considered the question seriously. Admiral, I spent 12 years serving my country in uniform. I'm proud of that service. But the most important mission of my life is raising a daughter who will make this world better. That's not a step down from military service. That's the reason military service matters. Victoria stared at him, feeling something fundamental shift in her understanding of purpose and priority. You're remarkable, Frank. He smiled slightly. I'm a father doing his job, just like you're an officer doing yours. Victoria felt compelled to ask the question that had been haunting her. Frank, when you were calling in those strikes at 73 Easting, with enemy tanks bearing down on you, what were you thinking about? Frank was quiet for a long moment. I was thinking about getting my people home alive. I was thinking about wives and children and parents who were waiting for those soldiers to come back. I was thinking about the responsibility I had to make sure my coordinates were perfect, because one mistake would mean good men dying for nothing. Were you afraid? Terrified, Frank said without hesitation. But fear doesn't matter when people are counting on you. You do your job, and you trust your training, and you make the best decisions you can with the information you have. Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying his face. How do you do it, Frank? How do you carry that kind of responsibility and still sleep at night? You remember that you're not carrying it alone. Every soldier who made it home from 73 Easting, every person whose life was saved because those coordinates were accurate. They're carrying part of it too. We all share the weight. Victoria felt something break open inside her chest, a recognition that she had been carrying her own responsibilities alone for too long, that she had mistaken isolation for strength. Frank, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? I mean, are you truly content with the life you've chosen? Frank's smile was radiant. Admiral, every morning I wake up knowing that the most important person in my world is safe and loved and supported. Every evening I come home to someone who is genuinely glad to see me. Every day I get to witness a young woman becoming the person she's meant to be. He paused. What could make me happier than that? Victoria felt a tear slide down her cheek. I can't remember the last time someone was genuinely glad to see me. Frank's expression grew gentle. That's a choice too, Admiral, just like everything else. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The next morning, Victoria found herself arriving at the Pentagon early, not to get a jump on her workload, but because she was hoping to see Frank again. She had spent the night thinking about their conversation, about the way he spoke about his daughter, about the quiet contentment in his voice when he talked about his life. She found him in the break room, sitting at a small table with a thermos of coffee and a paperback book. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Admiral, you're here early. So are you. Victoria gestured toward the empty chair across from him. Mind if I join you? Of course not. Victoria sat down, noting the title of his book, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Light reading. Frank chuckled. Old habits. I still find military strategy fascinating, even if I'm not practicing it anymore. What's your take on Sun Tzu's philosophy? Frank marked his place and closed the book. Know your enemy and know yourself. But I think the most important part is knowing yourself, understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your motivations. He met her eyes. "What drives you, Admiral?" The question caught Victoria off guard. What do you mean? What gets you up in the morning? What makes you feel like your life has meaning?" Victoria realized with uncomfortable clarity that she had no immediate answer. "My career, I suppose, my responsibilities, the mission. But what's underneath that? What's the reason behind the mission?" Victoria thought about it seriously. "Service to country, I guess. Protecting American interests. Maintaining global stability." "Those are important things," Frank agreed, "but they're abstract. What makes them personal for you?" Victoria found herself struggling with the question. I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Frank leaned forward slightly. "For me, serving in the military was about protecting people like Maria and Sophia, about making sure little girls could grow up safe and free to become whoever they wanted to be. It was personal from the beginning." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. "I don't think I've ever thought about it that way." "How do you think about it?" Victoria considered honestly. "Achievement, recognition, being respected for my capabilities, making admiral before I was 50. She paused, realizing how hollow it sounded when spoken aloud. "Proving that a woman could rise to the highest levels of naval command." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Those are valid motivations, but they're about you. What about the people you're serving?" Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I suppose I haven't thought much about that." "It's never too late to start," Frank said gently. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, Victoria grappling with the realization that she had spent 3 decades climbing a ladder without ever questioning where it was leading. "Frank, can I ask you about that day? 73 Easting?" "What would you like to know?" "What it felt like. What it was really like to have that much responsibility in your hands." Frank was quiet for a long time, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee mug. "It felt like the weight of the world," he said finally. "Every coordinate I called in represented lives, not just our people, but theirs too. Even enemy soldiers have families, people who love them." Victoria blinked, surprised by his perspective. "When I was adjusting fire for the A-10s, I wasn't thinking about destroying enemy equipment," Frank continued. "I was thinking about ending the threat as quickly and efficiently as possible so that everyone could go home. Our soldiers to their families, the Iraqi soldiers who survived to theirs. That's a remarkably humanitarian way to think about warfare." "It's the only way I could think about it and still do the job," Frank said. "The moment you start seeing enemies as less than human, you lose something essential about yourself." Victoria stared at him, feeling something profound shift in her understanding of military service. "How do you maintain that perspective under fire?" "Training helps, but mostly it's remembering why you're there. I wasn't there to kill people. I was there to protect my fellow soldiers and accomplish the mission with minimal casualties on both sides." "And afterward, how did you process what you had done?" Frank's expression grew thoughtful. "I came home to Maria and baby Sophia. Every night I would hold my daughter and remember that somewhere in Iraq there were fathers holding their children too. Some of those children had lost their fathers that day because of my coordinates. That's a heavy thing to carry." Victoria felt tears threatening again. "How do you live with that?" "By making sure their sacrifice meant something, by being the best father I can be, by raising a daughter who will help heal this world instead of hurting it, by treating every person I meet with dignity and respect." Frank met her eyes. "By remembering that the freedom to choose love over hate is what we fought for in the first place." Victoria sat in stunned silence, realizing that she was in the presence of a depth of wisdom and character she had never encountered before. This man had faced the ultimate test of human nature, and emerged more compassionate, not less, more humble, not more proud. "Frank, would you mind if I asked about your daughter, about Sophia?" Frank's face lit up immediately. "What would you like to know?" "What's she like? What are her dreams?" "She's brilliant," Frank said with unmistakable pride. "Honor roll every semester, first chair violin in the school orchestra. She wants to study international relations and work for the United Nations someday. She believes she can help solve conflicts through diplomacy instead of warfare." "She sounds remarkable." "She is, and she's nothing like me, which is exactly what Maria hoped for." Frank smiled. "Maria always said the world needed more bridge builders and fewer wall breakers." "Is that where Sophia gets her diplomatic aspirations?" "Partly, but mostly she's just naturally empathetic. She sees conflict and immediately starts thinking about how to resolve it. Last year, there was a bullying situation at school, and instead of reporting it or ignoring it, she organized a peer mediation program." Victoria found herself smiling. "She organized her own diplomatic solution. Exactly. 15 years old, and she's already more effective at conflict resolution than most adults I know." "She must be proud of your service record." Frank's expression grew thoughtful. "She knows I served, but I've never told her the details. She knows I was in Desert Storm, but she doesn't know about 73 Easting or any of the specific operations." "Why not?" "Because I want her to be proud of who I am now, not who I used to be. I want her to see value in quiet service, in being present for the people you love, in choosing humility over recognition." Frank paused. "The world will try to teach her that worth is measured by achievement and status. I want her to learn that worth is measured by character and love." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. "You're teaching her something I wish I had learned earlier." "It's never too late to learn it, Admiral." "Please, call me Victoria, at least when we're talking like this." Frank nodded. "Victoria." Victoria felt a warmth spread through her at the sound of her name in his voice. "Frank, would you be willing to have lunch with me sometime? Not as Admiral and custodian, but as friends?" Frank studied her face carefully. "Are you sure that's appropriate, Admiral? Victoria." "I don't care about appropriate anymore," Victoria said, surprising herself with the honesty. "I care about spending time with someone who makes me want to be a better person." Frank was quiet for a long moment. "I usually eat lunch with Sophia when she gets out of school early. On Wednesdays, she only has classes until noon." "I'd love to meet her if that would be okay." Frank's smile was slow and genuine. "She'd like that. She's always curious about the people I work with." "What would you tell her about me?" Frank considered the question. "That you're someone who's brave enough to admit when she's wrong and strong enough to change when she needs to." Victoria felt tears threaten again. "That's more generous than I deserve." "No," Frank said gently. "That's exactly what you deserve. We all deserve the chance to grow." As they sat in the Pentagon break room watching the sun rise over Washington through the small window, Victoria realized that she was falling in love, not with the war hero Frank had been, but with the man he had chosen to become. With his gentleness, his wisdom, his unwavering commitment to being present for the people he loved. For the first time in her adult life, Victoria Sterling found herself wanting something more than career advancement or professional recognition. She wanted to be worthy of the love of a man who understood that true strength looked like vulnerability, that real courage looked like choosing love over ambition, and that the greatest victories were often the quietest ones. The morning shift was beginning to arrive, the corridors filling with the sounds of another day in the Pentagon. Frank closed his book and prepared to begin his rounds. "Victoria," he said as he stood, Thank you for last night, for listening, for trying to understand. Thank you for helping me see things differently." Frank paused at the door. "See you around?" "Definitely," Victoria said. "And Frank, I'm looking forward to Wednesday." His smile was warm and real. "So am I." As Frank left to begin his work, Victoria remained in the break room, watching through the window as the sun climbed higher over the nation's capital. Somewhere in Arlington, a 16-year-old girl was getting ready for school, unaware that her father was changing the life of one of the most powerful women in the Pentagon. Victoria thought about Sophia, about Frank's dedication to being present for every important moment of her life. She thought about the peer mediation program, about a young woman who saw conflict and immediately looked for ways to heal it rather than win it. And for the first time in her career-focused life, Admiral Victoria Sterling found herself wondering what it would be like to be part of a family where love mattered more than achievement, where presence was valued more than position, where the most important victories happened not in boardrooms or battlefields, but around dinner tables and in school auditoriums, and in quiet moments between people who had chosen to put each other first. The revelation was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. Victoria had spent her entire adult life building walls of professional competence and emotional distance. Frank was showing her what life looked like when those walls came down, when strength looked like softness and courage looked like commitment to the people you loved. Wednesday couldn't come soon enough. Wednesday arrived with the crisp clarity of a Virginia autumn morning. Admiral Victoria Sterling found herself checking her reflection in her office window for the third time, smoothing her uniform jacket with hands that trembled slightly. She hadn't felt this nervous since her first command briefing, and the realization that she was more anxious about meeting a 16-year-old girl than she had been about addressing the Joint Chiefs was both humbling and terrifying. At 11:45, she made her way to the small Café C in Pentagon City, where Frank had suggested they meet. It was the kind of place that served honest food to honest people. Nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress, just a warm space where families could share a meal without pretense. Victoria spotted Frank immediately, sitting at a corner table with a young woman who could only be Sophia. The girl was stunning in the way that only comes from inner light shining outward. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater that spoke of careful economy rather than careless expense. But it was her eyes that caught Victoria's attention. Intelligent, curious, kind eyes that seemed to see everything and judge nothing. She was reviewing sheet music while Frank read a newspaper, both of them comfortable in each other's presence in the way that only came from years of genuine companionship. Victoria approached their table, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Frank." He looked up and smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Victoria, right on time." He stood and gestured to his daughter. "Victoria Sterling, I'd like you to meet Sophia Martinez. Sophia, this is Admiral Sterling." Sophia rose gracefully and extended her hand with the poise of someone far older than her years. "Admiral Sterling, it's a pleasure to meet you. Dad's told me you work together." Victoria shook the girl's hand, surprised by the firm confidence of her grip. "Please call me Victoria, and the pleasure is entirely mine. Your father has told me wonderful things about you." Sophia's smile was radiant. "He has a tendency to exaggerate, but I appreciate the kindness." She gestured to the empty chair. "Please join us. I hope you don't mind that I brought my music. I have orchestra practice after lunch." Victoria sat down, feeling oddly out of place in her formal uniform surrounded by the casual warmth of this father-daughter lunch. "What piece are you working on?" "Dvorak's New World Symphony," Sophia said, her eyes lighting up. "I have a solo passage in the second movement. It's challenging, but it's one of my favorite pieces. There's something about the way Dvorak captures the feeling of longing for home that just, it speaks to me. Victoria found herself genuinely interested. Do you plan to study music in college? Music will always be part of my life, but I'm hoping to study international relations. I want to work for the United Nations someday, maybe in conflict mediation. Sophia's expression grew serious. I believe most wars happen because people stop seeing each other as human beings. If we could just learn to listen to each other, really listen, I think we could solve a lot of problems without violence. Victoria glanced at Frank, who was watching his daughter with unconcealed pride. That's a beautiful perspective. Dad taught me that, Sophia said simply. He always says that the strongest people are the ones who choose peace when they could choose war. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. Here was a 16-year-old girl who understood something about strength and conflict that many military leaders never grasped. Your father is a wise man. He's the best man I know, Sophia said without hesitation. After Mom died, he could have done anything, gone anywhere, but he chose to stay here with me, to be present for all the ordinary moments that make a life. She paused, looking at Frank with eyes full of love. A lot of fathers think providing means just earning money. Dad understands that providing means showing up. Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes. The love between this father and daughter was so pure, so genuine, that it made her chest ache with longing. They ordered lunch, simple sandwiches, and supa, and spent the next hour talking about Sophia's school, her dreams, her perspective on the world. Victoria found herself charmed by the girl's intelligence and moved by her compassion. When Sophia talked about organizing the peer mediation program at her school, Victoria could see both Frank's tactical thinking and his gentle heart in the way she approached conflict resolution. Victoria, Sophia said as they finished eating, Dad mentioned that you're an admiral. That must be incredibly demanding. It is, Victoria admitted. The responsibility can be overwhelming sometimes. How do you handle the pressure, the weight of making decisions that affect so many people? Victoria considered the question seriously. Honestly, Sophia, I'm not sure I've been handling it as well as I thought I was. Your father has been teaching me some things about leadership that I'm still processing. Sophia looked between her father and Victoria with the perceptiveness that only children possess. He has a way of making people think about what really matters, doesn't he? He does indeed. Frank checked his watch. Sweetheart, we should probably get you to school. Sophia nodded and began gathering her music. As she stood, she surprised Victoria by leaning down and giving her a quick hug. It was wonderful meeting you, Victoria. I hope we'll see you again soon. Victoria found herself blinking back tears as she returned the embrace. I hope so too. After Sophia left for school, Frank and Victoria walked slowly back toward the Pentagon, neither of them in a hurry to end their time together. She's extraordinary, Victoria said finally. She's everything good about this world, Frank replied. Everything worth protecting. I can see why you made the choices you did, why you gave up everything else to be present for her. Frank stopped walking and turned to face Victoria. I didn't give up everything else. I found everything that mattered. Victoria met his eyes, feeling the weight of truth in his words. Frank, I need to tell you something. What's that? I think I'm falling in love with you. Frank's expression grew serious. Victoria, I know it's complicated. I know we come from different worlds, different perspectives, but spending time with you, listening to your wisdom, seeing the man you've chosen to become, it's changed something fundamental inside me. Frank was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that for the first time in my adult life, I want something more than career advancement or professional recognition. I want to be part of what you and Sophia have. I want to learn how to love the way you do, how to be present the way you are. Frank reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. Victoria, you should know that if we pursue this, it won't be easy. My priority will always be Sophia, always. And there are people who won't understand, who will see your association with a Pentagon custodian as career suicide. Let them, Victoria said fiercely. I'm tired of living for other people's approval. I want to live for something real. Frank's smile was slow and genuine. Then we'll take it one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other. Victoria felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with ambition or achievement. For the first time in decades, she was choosing love over advancement, presence over prestige. They had reached the Pentagon entrance when Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her stomach dropped. I need to take this, she said to Frank. Admiral Sterling. Victoria, it's Patricia Hawkins. I need to see you in my office immediately. We have a situation. Victoria's chest tightened. What kind of situation? The kind that involves Master Sergeant Martinez and some very unhappy people in very high places. How soon can you get here? Victoria ended the call and turned to Frank, her face pale. That was General Hawkins. She needs to see me about you. Something's wrong. Frank's expression grew guarded. What kind of wrong? I don't know, but we're about to find out. 20 minutes later, Victoria sat in General Hawkins' office, facing a crisis she hadn't anticipated. Across from the general's desk sat two men in expensive suits, Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Chen and Pentagon Deputy Chief of Staff Marcus Webb. Both looked like they had swallowed something unpleasant. Admiral Sterling, General Hawkins began, it seems your interaction with Master Sergeant Martinez has attracted some unwanted attention. Deputy Secretary Chen leaned forward, his expression stern. Admiral, we understand you've been fraternizing with custodial staff, specifically with a custodian who has been telling elaborate stories about his military service. Victoria felt her temper flare. With respect, sir, Master Sergeant Martinez hasn't been telling stories. His service record speaks for itself. Marcus Webb snorted. Service record? Admiral, we've done some digging into this Martinez character. While it's true he served in the Army, his claims about his role in Desert Storm are greatly exaggerated. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. Exaggerated? Have you read his file? We've read a file, Chen said coldly, but files can be embellished. What concerns us is that you, a senior naval officer, have been publicly humiliated by a custodian spinning war stories. It's bad for morale, bad for discipline, and bad for your career. Victoria felt her world tilting off its axis. Sir, I was not humiliated. I was educated. Frank Martinez is a decorated veteran who... Admiral, Webb interrupted. Frank Martinez is a janitor who has been filling your head with fantasies. The man was discharged from the Army for psychological reasons after a brief deployment to Saudi Arabia. He never saw combat. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. That's impossible. General Hawkins leaned forward, her expression grave. Victoria, I've been ordered to inform you that Master Sergeant Martinez will be transferred to a different facility effective immediately. His security clearance is being reviewed, and his employment with the Pentagon is under investigation. On what grounds? Victoria's voice was sharp with disbelief. False representation of military service, Chen said. Impersonating a decorated veteran. Fraudulent claims of combat experience. He paused. We're considering criminal charges." Victoria felt the room spinning around her. Everything she thought she knew, everything she had come to believe about Frank was being called into question. "I don't understand. The battle reports, the testimonials—" "Forgeries," Webb said dismissively. "Very good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. This man has been living a lie for years, Admiral, and unfortunately you've become entangled in that lie." General Hawkins' voice was gentle but firm. "Victoria, I'm recommending that you distance yourself from this situation immediately. Your reputation and your career are at stake." Victoria stared at the three officials, her mind reeling. Could she have been so wrong about Frank? Could the man who had shown her such wisdom, such character, really be a fraud? "Where is he now?" she asked quietly. "Master Sergeant Martinez has been escorted from the building," Chen said. "He's been informed that he's suspended pending investigation. I suggest you have no further contact with him." Victoria stood on shaking legs. "May I be excused?" General Hawkins nodded. "Take some time to process this, Victoria, and remember you're not the first person to be deceived by someone spinning tall tales." Victoria left the office feeling as though her entire world had collapsed around her. The man she had been falling in love with, the hero she had admired, the father whose dedication had inspired her. Was he really nothing more than a fraud? That evening, Victoria sat in her apartment staring at her phone. Frank had called 3 times, but she hadn't answered. How could she face him? How could she look into his eyes and ask if everything he had told her was a lie? Finally, she picked up the phone and dialed his number. "Victoria." His voice was strained, tired. "Frank, we need to talk." "I know. Can you come over? Sophia is at orchestra practice until 9. Victoria drove to Frank's address in Arlington, a modest apartment complex that spoke of careful budgeting and practical choices. She climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, her heart hammering with dread and confusion. Frank opened the door before she could knock. He looked older somehow, worn down by the day's events. "Come in," he said quietly. The apartment was small but immaculately clean. Family photos covered one wall. Pictures of Frank with a beautiful woman who must have been Maria. Photos of Sophia at various ages. Images of a life built on love and presence. But Victoria found herself studying the photos with new eyes, looking for clues, for evidence of deception. "They're saying you're a fraud," Victoria said without preamble. "They're saying your service record is fabricated, that you never served in combat, that you were discharged for psychological reasons." Frank was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with grief. "And what do you believe?" Victoria stared at him, searching his face for answers. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Frank walked to a closet and pulled out a metal box, the same one he had shown her in the photograph from his file. He set it on the coffee table and opened it slowly. Inside were medals, commendations, photographs, and a folded flag, but also letters, and dozens of them, from soldiers whose lives Frank had saved, from families who had written to thank him, from commanding officers who had witnessed his heroism firsthand. "These are from the men who were there," Frank said quietly. "Read them." Victoria picked up a letter at random. It was written on stationery from Walter Reed Medical Center, dated 2 years after Desert Storm. "Master Sergeant Martinez, I don't know if you remember me, Sergeant Billy Thompson, Eagle Troop. You saved my life at 73 Easting when that T-72 had us pinned down. Your fire control brought in the A-10s that knocked it out. I've been carrying guilt for 20 years because I never thanked you properly. My daughter just graduated from college, and my son is getting married next month. They exist because you made perfect coordinates under fire. I will never forget what you did for all of us. With gratitude, Billy Thompson. Victoria's hands shook as she read letter after letter, each one confirming Frank's heroism, each one written by someone whose life had been saved by his actions. "Frank," she whispered, "if these are real—" "They're real," he said simply. "Every word." "Then why are they saying you're a fraud? Why are they trying to destroy you?" Frank sat down heavily on the couch. "Because someone doesn't want the truth to come out. Someone with enough power to alter records, to create false documentation, to make a hero disappear." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. Who would do that? Someone who benefits from keeping certain stories buried. Someone who doesn't want questions asked about what really happened in Desert Storm. Victoria stared at him, pieces of a puzzle beginning to fall into place. "Frank, what aren't you telling me?" Frank met her eyes, and she saw fear there for the first time since she had known him. "Victoria, 73. Easting wasn't just a successful engagement. It was a cover-up. And if they're coming after me now, it means someone is afraid that the truth is finally going to come out." Victoria felt her world shifting again, but this time toward something darker and more complex than she had imagined. What truth? Frank took a deep breath. The truth about who gave the Iraqi Republican Guard our coordinates. The truth about why American soldiers were sent into a kill zone. The truth about who profited from prolonging that war. Victoria's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She glanced at the caller ID, General Hawkins. "Answer it," Frank said, "but be careful what you say." Victoria answered the call. General Hawkins. "Victoria, where are you?" "I'm following up on the Martinez situation." "Good. I need you to come in early tomorrow. There are some documents you need to see, some evidence that will put this whole matter to rest." Victoria met Frank's eyes. "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that will show you exactly what kind of man you've been dealing with. The kind that will make you grateful you found out the truth before you destroyed your career over a con artist." Victoria ended the call and looked at Frank. "She wants me to see evidence tomorrow, evidence that will prove you're a fraud." Frank nodded grimly. "They're moving fast. That means we're running out of time." "Time for what?" "To find the real evidence, to prove what actually happened at 73 Easting." Frank stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Arlington skyline. "Victoria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." "What?" Frank turned to face her, his expression serious. "Are you willing to risk everything, whoosh, your career, your reputation, your future, so to help me prove the truth?" Victoria looked around the small apartment, at the photos of a family built on love, at the letters from grateful soldiers, at the man who had taught her the difference between achievement and accomplishment. She thought about Sophia, about a 16-year-old girl who believed in peace over war, who saw conflict and looked for ways to heal it. "Yes," she said without hesitation, "whatever it takes." Frank's smile was sad and grateful at the same time. "Then we'd better get started, because if they're willing to destroy me to keep this secret, they won't hesitate to destroy you too." Victoria felt fear and determination war in her chest. She was about to step into a battle she didn't fully understand, against enemies she couldn't yet identify, for a truth that powerful people wanted to keep buried. But as she looked at Frank Martinez, her hero, father, man of unshakable integrity, she knew she had no choice. Some fights were worth everything, and love was always worth fighting for. "What do we do first?" she asked. Frank's expression hardened with the resolve of a soldier preparing for battle. "We find out who's been pulling the strings, and we make sure the truth finally comes to light." Victoria nodded, feeling something steel-like settle in her chest. For the first time in her career, she was fighting for something that mattered more than advancement or recognition. She was fighting for love, for truth, and for the right of a hero to live with dignity. The battle for Frank Martinez's honor was about to begin, and Admiral Victoria Sterling was ready for war. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen. Now, I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.